Time for some classic kids' TV show stuff with a classic hit, Dexter's Lab, about a young kid who is well and truly on his way to becoming some kind of mad scientist, and the many inventions that get made by him, only to get foiled by his sister Dee Dee or villain rival Mandark. Now, the part of the show that we're going to be talking about today was not actually helmed by its creator, Genndy Tartakovsky, but by the guy that Cartoon Network brought in for the revival of the series, Chris Savino, featuring significant changes to the art design and characters, as Tartakovsky had left to go and make Samurai Jack. Back to the past, Samurai Jack. This was also the first cartoon that Cartoon Network made, as part of their big mission to generate some original animated series in the late 90s and 2000s. It featured stuff like Dexter's Lab, Johnny Bravo, Powerpuff Girls, Ed, Ed and Eddie, Courage the Cowardly Dog, and Cow and Chicken.
Cartoon, cartoon!
Cartoon cartoons.
Cartoon, cartoons! Cartoon, cartoons!
So yeah, it was a pretty roaring success that pumped out what would end up becoming revered down the line. But while that might be all cool and good, the more important question is the trans stuff. What is the trans stuff here, you might be asking? Well, it's not the explicit trans stuff that you might be expecting, the trans stuff here being more the interpretive element that comes from a nostalgic gender swapping slash gender fluid childhood that goes a long way towards giving young, in the closet trans people an outlet for seeing themselves in the media that they consume. Something to speak to them in a time period when kids would not be able to see an actual trans person in the stuff they would watch.
No way. Not this time. No, it never happened.
That's why it's still worth talking about stuff like, I don't know, A Boy Named Sue Season 3 Episode 6A, or Oh Brother Season 3 Episode 11A. They might not be the definitive that some people get stuck on, but that certainly does not make them unworthwhile for discussion. Oh, also, while we're here, if you want to support the channel, then you can check out today's sponsor, which is the people on my Patreon, who help me keep this whole thing running. If you like what I do, subscribing there means a whole lot to me and to keeping the channel going at the current rate that it is. With all that introduction out of the way, let's move on to discovering the true secret past of the villainous scientist known only as Mandark.
Please, sir, call me Mandark.
Or is that the only thing we know him as? I mean, he does pretend to be Dexter's mum for an episode earlier on, and maybe there's something there, but we're talking specifically about A Boy Named Sue, which opens with, well, firstly, it opens with that banger-ass intro that I think really sells the show well. All the cool tech and ominous brass instrumentation gives it a bit of a different vibe to the other fare that one could find on Cartoon Network from that golden age. But beyond that, it gives us an intro that explains the premise of the episode, panning from the dark, stormy night above Mandark's way too spiky lair to be practical, with his obnoxious laughter, to him musing on how he ended up becoming such an evil mastermind, a musing that turns into a flashback, as he mentions the situation of his birth, in the tranquil village that he was born into.
An idealized world of peace and harmony, a place where man and beast live side by side.
You see, Mandark was originally born to a bunch of hippies, who lived in a hippie town where all of it was free love and peace and being one with nature and all that stuff that has weirdly turned those same hippies into modern day anti-vaxxers and conspiracy theorists. So, I mean, you know, kind of villainish in its own right. But Mandark clearly has a lot of negative feelings towards his birth town and his birth parents' ideals, perhaps centered around some element of rebellion, Or maybe because, as he says, he is innately evil, and when he was born into a birthing pool, he was struck by a lightning bolt that caused devil flames to appear in his eyes as a sign of his Prince of Darkness evil shit. It's entirely plausible that this whole flashback has a bit of an unreliable narrator. We're only getting the Mandark version of events here, and this is a guy who spices everything that he does up quite a bit.
Control.
Dexter, I'd like to introduce you to our nation's first president.
Now, that idea that this is being narrated by Mandark will come into play down the line when we get to the trans headcanon part of the episode. But for now, we see that Mandark's parents are seeking out a name for him that will defy gender norms and preconceived binary perceptions, which will not be linked to the stifling order of heteronormativity. And so they settle upon Susan, a name that instantly makes Mandark Baby begin crying because, that's a girl's name. Ugh, a guy getting a girl's name? Even a baby guy knows that's wrong.
You shall be named Susan.
Wah!
And yes, from initial context, that seems like a plot point which, if anything, reinforces gender binary norms, that shows how we have specific names that only certain genders can have, and it's wrong/harmful to a child to break those. But to that, I would say that the perspective that trans people have explored this from goes in a direction which somewhat negates that idea. I'll give you a little clue as to it before we move on, and that clue is trans mask. Think about it. Mandark then goes off about how a cosmic act of injustice had caused him to be born into a family of hippie peace lovers, when he was the crown prince of darkness and evil, but that no amount of smothering would be able to dampen his true nature.
No amount of compassion and humanity could dampen my true nature within.
Do you see it? Do you see how trans people who watched this back in the day might be doing the headcanon for this? Cosmic act of injustice, true nature. It's all there. Mandark then discovers science as a baby, science in this case being represented by what effectively amounts to just a lamp, and declares that if he could only master this, he would be able to rule the world. Only for his parents to stifle that and attempt to push him in a different direction, to give him all the flowers and painting and crystals that they thought would convince him to love what they want him to be.
Would have to wait, for it would seem my parents had a different idea for my development.
Also, they made him grow his hair long and wear pink clothes, which all clearly massively upset him, and ultimately lead to him having an outburst demanding that he get both meat and science. I'm not going to get into the connotations of meat and science here, and I probably never will, but if that's something you want to read into, then for the love of all that's holy, do it over there in the forbidden comments.
I want meat and I want science!
In response to this outburst, though, Mandark's parents decide that they need to do something to address the fact that they have ignored the needs of their child somewhat, committing to traversing the world in the hope that it would tame his dark desires and make him stop wanting to break free from the perceptions they had bound him with. Yeah, that's the solution, alright? No way that plan can fail. You might as well have sent him to a Pray the Evil Away camp. Through all of this, it's clear that Mandark was still struggling with himself, was still suffering from not being able to be true to himself, before his parents decide to settle down in that same village that Dexter lives in, bringing us to the crux of the Mandark origin story. Mandark runs into Dexter, who is doing some of that science shit that they both seem to love, and then gets hit in the head by that boy with the vague Eastern European accent that I can't quite place.
Thanks to my magnificent and astounding genius, science can hold its head up proudly.
Only for his rage at getting hit in the head with a wrench to turn into joy at the sight of the weird, wacky machinery that Dexter has built. Unfortunately, what could be a bonding moment and a chance for Mandark to meet someone else who could understand his plight is ruined by the fact that Dexter doesn't give two hoots and a holler about people and rushes him off, calling him a little girl.
Goodbye, little girl.
Oh, I'm not a little girl. I'm a little boy, just like you.
Mandark argues that he isn't a girl, he's a boy, to which Dexter engages in some of that transvestigation, looking him up and down before asking, what is his name then? When Mandark says that his name is Susan, it only goes really, really fucking badly. As Dexter begins laughing at Mandark, rolling on the floor, laughing his ass off. To which Mandark finally has his villain come to moment. That moment when a villain realizes why they must do evil, and the purpose for which they exist to commit some crime stuff. In this case, it's because Dexter is laughing at Mandark for being a boy named Susan, who wears girls' clothing and has long hair. Mandark decides that he must abandon the identity put on him by his parents to achieve this goal. He must cut his hair, wear masculine clothing, and change his name to Mandark, reflecting his true evil nature and identity, and how he actually wants the world to perceive him.
Achieve my goal, I could no longer be a long-haired girly named boy anymore. No!
Yeah, sure, dude. Whatever it takes to get you to the mountaintop of your gender identity and expression, I guess. We all get to it in different ways. Some of us see a character on a show. Some of us watch a real-life celebrity go through a transition. Some of us get laughed at by a child and we decide to swear revenge and then come out. All of this, though, is directly contrasted with a scene next, where as Mandark is rushing out into the world to do evil, he gets stopped by his parents, who refuse to use his new chosen name, and force him to come and continue doing their hippie peace rituals to his much chagrin.
My name is Mandark.
No, it's Susan.
And that's the episode. Now, there's a clear metaphor slash allegory here that I do not think is in any way, shape, or form intentional. I want to get that out of the way right now. That anything that is read into in this series as transgender interpretation is from my perspective and the perspective of trans people and the trans community looking for identity in places where the creator did not mean for it to be. Something which does not immediately negate its relevance nor importance to those people who saw that and felt those feelings from it in the past.
A name that told her the man I knew I could be. I was now Mandark!
We were stuck on canon and only canon and what the creator meant. The art world would be shit. And all those fun little communities where people get to RP and LARP and do fan-ons would be cold, barren wastelands, and nobody wants that. But the clear metaphor head perceptioning we can see here is that Mandark is a transmasc individual who has in some way conformed their origin story to be about this evil nature and the fact that they finally accepted it against their parents' wishes, when it is in fact about how he was born identified as a girl by others and perceived himself as a man despite that.
And so by some cruel and twisted cosmic joke, I, Mandark, had been born into a world of warm-hearted tenderness.
He cries at being given the name of a girl because of the already existent dysphoria that he feels as a child. He despises being forced to have long hair and flower pink clothes and wear flower crowns, and by connection despises the hippie nature which he associates with that femininity. In response, he seeks out science, which he and Dexter's lab associates with the masculine. And upon having a trigger moment with Dexter that really emphasizes all the things he finds wrong with his life, he decides to transition from being Susan to being Mandark, abandoning the femininity that has been thrust upon him in favor of the masculine that he chooses.
And today is my day! The future is now!
Now, it ain't a perfect allegory, but then again, basically nothing is perfect. Yet it is pretty obvious how some people that I've talked to and seen comments from could have watched this episode and come to think of Mandark as a trans man. The elements are all in play here. The pieces of a puzzle that when put together in the right order, and if you're looking to put it together that way, can be placed to exactly fit the mold that a trans community would empathize with. Like I said at the start, for trans kids, there wasn't a whole lot of stuff going around in the 1990s when this came out. And so, looking at the shadows on the wall was the only real place that a child was going to be able to find stuff that pertained to the situation they might be feeling internally. Ultimately, this view of Mandark does still have a sad connotation to it as well, as it's clear from the end of the episode that despite how he might feel and identify, that his parents who have so far failed him continue to do so by refusing to acknowledge who he is, and foisting the name that he clearly doesn't like upon him once more.
My name is Mandark.
No, it's Susan.
In that, there is a hint of a nasty trans reality that comes about for a lot of trans kids with unsupportive parents. No matter how you express yourselves, you can't truly escape the gender identity you had no choice in until you can get away from the people who will never let that perception of you go. That's just one of the episodes I want to discuss here from Dexter's Lab. The other one is a bit of a different fare. Still in the same camp as being a situation of trans headcanon, but it follows the more classic approach of magical/scientific gender swapping that you might have seen from past videos like Fairly Odd Parents.
What did you do? I didn't wish for this!
As Oh Brother revolves around the narrative of Dexter forcibly masking his sister, Dee Dee, into a boy to try and get her to stop sticking her nose into his science affairs. Oh Brother begins with Dexter getting harangued, as he so often does, by his sister Dee Dee in his laboratory, the haranguing being more incidental than targeted. Like, in this scene, Dee Dee is just kinda hanging out and infuriating Dexter with the way that she engages with his work. Something that he attributes, as he pushes her out, to her femininity, blaming it on the stupid girl aspect.
The dancing and the flowers and the girly sister stuff.
He laments the fact that if only he could share his science love with a brother, because surely a boy would be more receptive to science than a girl, right? I mean, a girl is only into flowers and dancing and makeup and all that stuff that we talked about in the A Boy Named Sue episode. It's kind of fascinating how much alt-right and conservative perceptions share in common with schoolyard sexism that get used in kids' episodes.
Fuck the woman, fuck the woman.
What? We love women.
What? Not like transgender.
No.
All gays
Yeah,
should
fuck
die.
gays.
Almost as if they don't update their views on people from the 3rd grade by, I don't know, meeting people from other genders and realizing that they are just as capable and non-stereotyped as everyone else. I mean, when episodes do what Dexter's Lab is going to try and do here, the point is generally to try and show that women and men are similar, that treating them differently is wrong. It's normally a moral lesson in gender equality.
I want it to look nice.
Well, you do.
I said, don't touch me.
This gender equality thing is played into by having Dexter engage in a sinister plot to put Dee Dee into a box that, much like the Dark Souls 2 coffin, gender swaps you into the other gender in the binary. In this situation, though, it's more of a forced masculization from Dexter, because he doesn't explain what he's doing to Dee Dee, and she doesn't get to properly consent to it with context. Like, sure, she says yes, but she doesn't really know what she's signed up for, so how much does that yes really mean?
Gee, Dex, I don't... Just to put them on! Okay!
What I'm saying is that this is some very dodgy science stuff. The kind of science stuff that falls into that megalomaniacal scientist area. Dexter opens the box, and Dee Dee has vanished, which he takes in stride as meaning that he can still get back to his work free from her hassling.
That's odd. Oh well, either way I can now return to my project in peace.
I think Dexter might be a bad brother and a bad person. A whole ass day later, A whole day of Dexter just tweaking the same bolt over and over, and he finally gets called to grab his brother for breakfast. His brother named Doody. A revelation that hits him like a wrecking ball of joy. Finally, another male companion in his life to share the same passions as him. 'Cause, well, men love science, right? Well, it turns out that Doody might actually be a bit more stereotypically manly masculine than Dexter thought. His room being a complete mess, covered in sports stuff, musical instruments, alcohol, posters of sexy women, and also a single signpost which just says dirt. Whatever the fuck that means. Dexter begins getting bullied by his brother. Some of that boys being boys, physical intimacy that he definitely does not want to be part of, but also is kind of his own fault for forcibly boy moding his sister. Like, my sympathy is here, it's just at a very, very low point. Dexter also gets passed around like a ball and spiked to the cheers of Doody at his own sportsmanship. And at this point, it's very clear to Dexter that his experiment was a success, just not in the way that he intended. I mean, it did the transitioning and the gender swap, it just didn't give him the person that he wanted. Probably a good message in there somewhere about how you can't force people to become who you want them to be. Either you have to accept them as what they are, or move on with your life, and attempting to force them will only backfire. Don't worry though, we'll also get to the trans stuff in the conclusion. I know you're probably already seeing it pretty clearly, why some trans kids might be looking at this episode with envy right now.
Get your brother Duty.
There's a very weird father-son bonding experience over the breakfast table that I don't wish I'd had committed to the old memory banks, but it's stuck in there now, so I'm gonna make you deal with it too. And we see here another unintended side effect of this experiment, which is that the father-son relationship that Dexter and his dad had is now replaced with a complete lack of interest from the father, as all his attention is focused onto Doody. Dexter sadly goes to his window upstairs to watch his family bask in the joy of passing some pigskin to one another without him.
Okay, Duty, catch!
Then Doody comes down into Dexter's lab and proceeds to run him around like a football ball again. This guy really does only have one major identity, huh? The whole thing with this scene, though, is showing how no matter what Dexter does to his sibling, they still kinda act the same way around his nerd shit. They still smash stuff up, show no real interest in the mechanical or robotic side of things, and are drawn towards impulsively hitting big red buttons.
What does this button do?
It's a message that Doody and Dee Dee, while being on opposite sides of a mask-femme spectrum, are surprisingly more alike than you would think. Dexter then just turns Dee Dee back, having learned only one lesson here, I guess. The lesson that he loves his sister a lot more than he would love his brother. It doesn't appear that he has really picked up the lesson about not messing with the bodies of others, as he does kinda continue doing that willy-nilly for the rest of this show's run, but I guess it's baby steps for an 11-minute episode. And that's the episode.
Hi, Dexter! Success! Oh,
Now, there's only really one major thing to talk about here from a trans perspective. One major clincher for why trans people would have seen this back in the day and clicked something from it, or included it in their nostalgic musings back on the past. It's the fucking machine, and the way in which the gender swap gets incorporated. Dee Dee becomes Doody with no hassle. It's like a switch gets flipped, and all of a sudden, that is what she is. Her body's masculine, her room is masculine, and the people in her life treat her like they would any boy normally.
oh, sweet brother! What kind of science scientific feat shall we conquer first?
There's no transitional period, no difficult process involving an awful lot of time, money, effort, and bigotry to get to that place. There is something almost romanticized about that in the trans experience, an impossible dream that does often get reflected in these gender-swapped children's narratives, through either science or magic. Triggers something for trans kids because it's the perfect encapsulation of "God, I wish that were me" for those who might be transmasc and facing down a long road filled with conversations that they might not want to have and difficult decisions. And seeing this idolized instant masculinity and acceptance is something that can be dysphoric to consider, but does the work of getting the person to consider it at all. So through both A Boy Named Sue and Oh Brother, I think we can see a variety of ways that trans people can connect with the stories portrayed that are not necessarily intended to be perceived in that trans manner, nor created as trans allegories in the first place. Both episodes approach this from different areas. And also, both for once in a long time, are trans-masc headcanon/interpretations of character representations, which I think is a good thing, if just for the fact that the trans-masc community rarely got these sort of things in kids' media that I've seen. Most of the Nickelodeon and Disney stuff is boys turn into girls, or boys cross-dressing as girls for a variety of purposes, like Big Time Rush or Boy Meets World.
Hallway party.
Well, then why don't we skip the guest list?
They also think that it's worth mentioning that there is no real point considering the people behind this show. I have looked into them, and trust me, there really isn't much to see there. It's just a case that gender-based jokes and gender swapping was and kind of always has been an in thing for shows to do. Most shows that run long enough end up having a character cross-dress or gender swap for generally some comedic purpose.
We used to dress up in mom's clothes all the time. You made us call you B?
But because that is one of the few normalized ways that trans people can see even the inkling of an iota of something akin to ourselves in the media that we consumed, I think that those stories ended up becoming a real bedrock of trans experience in the past. That they do get mentioned a lot by trans people when they think back to what got them considering their gender identity, or gave them that initial impetus to start a gender journey. So here's to all the trans people that got their start from Dexter's lab. I can see why it happened. And I hope that in the future, the trans kids of the next generation can have some actual serious and intended trans representation to begin their lives off of, unlike what me and you probably got if you're the person who had Dexter's Lab as their, their big trans nostalgia thing. We didn't get the chance. We can make sure the next generation does. If you liked what I did here, or liked what I said, or just enjoy me looking at various pieces of pop culture while you play games or make food or something, then that's great. And you can consider giving this a like, share, subscribe, comment, or even check out some of my other videos on trans stuff. I've got a lot of things going into a variety of places, both known and somewhat unknown. They also run the gambit from fanon to real canon as well, if that's something you care about. If you really, really like what I do and want to support this, the best way to do it is by going to my Patreon or Ko-Fi and subscribing there. Those in the $5 and up category should be scrolling past the screen right now, and I really appreciate everyone who does support me for helping to make this channel a functioning part of my life. It turns out that having a social media degree isn't exactly the best for getting an IRL job, especially when the government cuts all the departments that you would be looking at getting a job for. And so having Patreon pay for the time that I invest into these videos lets me focus more on these videos instead of having to hunt out ways to keep myself housed and fed. Trust me, I've looked into it, and there is no way I could do this channel if I wasn't paying for food, rent, power, internet, and cat. I've tried. The modern world really does just lump bills onto you for the basic essentials of getting to live. So if you want to alleviate that stuff and let me focus on the YouTube channel more consistently and intently, like I have for the past year, then going to Patreon is the best way to do that. If I also have enough Patreon subscribers, I can focus on doing stuff like more of the brief look ats, because those take a lot of time, and it's hard to do those while also doing other videos. Other than all of that, thank you for watching the video, and I hope you have a great day.